Despite all of the fascinating stuff that Pokemon games have to offer, there's one side of the series that doesn't really get talked about very much. A side of the series that tends to be hidden in plain sight, that most people don't really bother to think of or look into when playing the games. And in this video, we are going to be delving into this hidden side of Pokemon and the super interesting stuff it has to offer. So we all know that the Pokemon regions are based on various real-world locations, like Kanto being based on the Kanto region of Japan, Kalos being based on France, or Paldea being inspired by the Iberian Peninsula. But a really interesting thing about this is that Game Freak don't just find a general location to base their games on and call it a day. They actually go way deeper into the real-world locations that inspire Pokemon, and use them to create some amazingly interesting details and Easter eggs that sit within the games that most of the time are going to go completely unnoticed. Take for instance Unova. Unova is based on the New York metropolitan area in the United States, and is where you find the Dream Yard. The Dream Yard is basically the ruins of what used to be a research facility, and something interesting that happens here is that in Black and White 2, Latios and Latios can be found here. But did you know that there's likely a very specific reason why these Pokemon appear in this location? Geographically, the Dream Yard seems to be based on the area where Floyd Bennett Field sits in real life. Floyd Bennett Field is a former airfield in Brooklyn, New York that was once used for a variety of commercial, military, and general aviation-related traffic, before essentially being decommissioned and no longer being used as such today. Kinda like how the Dream Yard used to be a research facility, but is no longer in use. And the reason why Latias and Latios likely appear here in Black and White 2 is because of this inspiration, since they themselves are partially based on jets. I personally find details like this extremely cool because it just goes to show how much detail there truly is in the Pokemon games, and how cool little references and Easter eggs like this can pretty much be found all throughout them. In Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, it is implied that the player character is originally from the Galar region. This is due to the mention of them having recently moved to Paldea, the presence of your mom's pet Squavit, and the fact that she uses the phrase cuppa when referring to a cup of tea, which we know from Sword and Shield is distinctly a Galarian phrase. Well, while you may have thought that this was just a neat little piece of world building or a nice follow-up from the previous Gen 8 games that came before Scarlet and Violet, it actually most likely has a real-world connection. The area of Paldea that the player lives in equates to a place called Gibraltar in real life, and it sits on the central southern tip of the Iberian Peninsula, just like Cabo Poco does in Paldea. And with respect to Scarlet and Violet, an interesting thing about this place is that it's actually a British territory, which is likely the reason for all the nods to Galar that you get here at the start of the game, and in my opinion, is an extremely cool reference. This next one is crazy because it actually has to do with the fact that these videos cost money to make, but today's sponsor, Rocket Money, is here to help. Not only are they very graciously supporting the channel to help make this content possible, but they can also help out with all kinds of financial stuff. Rocket Money is the personal finance app that helps you cancel subscriptions, lower bills, and manage your money better. For instance, Rocket Money can identify any recurring charges that you may have and cancel any unwanted subscriptions, and you can even do it within the app so you don't have to deal with those annoying customer service calls. Rocket Money can also analyze your spending habits and help you to create a custom budget that fits both your lifestyle and helps you to save at the same time. In fact, Rocket Money has helped to save its customers up to $740 a year when they use all the app's premium features, with over $500 million in canceled subscriptions. So to save more and spend less, join the over 5 million members using Rocket Money today. You can go to rocketmoney.com/hoopsandhiphop or click the link in the description to get started for free, and you can also unlock even more features with premium. That's rocketmoney.com/hoopsandhiphop to get started for free, and a big thank you to them for supporting the channel. One region that is known to pull very heavily from its real-world inspiration is Johto. While it doesn't really bring attention to itself in-game, Johto is practically an exact recreation of the Kansai region in Japan, and that results in a lot of really interesting explanations for various parts of Johto. For example, Olivine City is based on Kobe, Japan, which is probably most well known for Kobe beef, which it cultivates. This in turn would explain why Moo Moo Farm, with all of its Miltank, sits right outside of Olivine City on Route 39, although you might not want to tell Miltank that. Moo Moo Farm also likely has a direct inspiration of its own though, as it is potentially based on Rokosen Pasture, which is a farm of a similar variety that is located just outside of Kobe City. In fact, just about everything that you can find in the Johto games has some kind of real-world inspiration like this. For instance, the fact that we find a pharmacy in Cianwood City is due to Cianwood City's inspiration, the city of Naruto, and the fact that a large pharmaceutical company known as Otsuka Pharmaceutical was founded and is headquartered in this area. There's also a town in Kansai known as Minabe, which is well known for its apricots, and if this rings a bell at all, that's because it is likely what inspired apricorns, which Kurt uses to make into Pokeballs, and who resides in Azalea Town. With that in mind, Minabe is also known for a special kind of charcoal they produce known as Binchotan, and comparing this to Pokemon, the charcoal item that we see in the games was introduced in Generation 2, and the only place that you can get it in Gold and Silver is in Azalea Town, and they even sell it at the Pokemart there. There's even a cool fact like this to be had concerning one of Johto's most infamous anecdotes. So it's pretty well known at this point that New Barktown used to be known as Silent Hill during the beta stages of Gold and Silver's development. And this quickly caught on as kind of a dark fact because it shares a name with the Silent Hill video game franchise. The truth is though, New Barktown isn't as scary as this would lead you to believe, because the name actually comes from New Barktown's real-world basis, Shizuoka. Shizuoka is a city in Japan, and its name means still or calm hill. So, New Barktown's early name actually comes directly from its inspiration, despite being tied to the Silent Hill game franchise for years due to this coincidence. Silent Hill did, however, possibly play a factor into why the name of this town was changed though, which overall is still pretty crazy. So as you can see, there is a lot of cool referential material to the real world in Pokemon outside of just the bigger stuff that's easier to see. But what about the kinds of places in Pokemon that are a little more fantastical? Take for instance Mirage Island. This island in Hoenn literally disappears and reappears depending on which day you play the game. So where could a location that literally falls off the face of the map most of the time actually come from? Well, while you might think that this is something that is a little more of a creation of the developers themselves, it is actually based on a real-world location. Mirage Island is likely inspired by Yabiji, a coral reef in Japan that can occasionally be seen above the water, which is likely what inspires Mirage Island's unique trait of appearing and disappearing. And I personally find it really interesting how even a more fantasy-oriented place like this still has roots in the real world. There's also some really cool historical stuff that is referenced within the various Pokemon regions, and as a history buff, this kind of stuff is especially cool to me. For example, if you were like me and wondered why the heck there was so much Unova stuff going on in Legends Arceus, which is a game that is set in the past of a Japanese region, then you were probably left wondering, because the game doesn't really touch on this at all. But it all has to do with real-world history. The main settlement of the game, Jubilife Village, obviously becomes Jubilife City in the modern-day games, and Jubilife is based on Sapporo, Japan, a city that was actually settled and established with the help of various advisors and officials from the United States. settlements, making the US a key factor in the city's history, and perfectly explaining why a ton of Unova stuff would be in this game, considering it also takes place in the past, which is honestly just a beautiful attention to detail by Game Freak. And speaking of Unova, have you ever wondered why these big, ornate, Dutch-style windmills can randomly be found in Isserus City? They're cool and all, sure, but you probably haven't thought much of them since they're literally just a decoration and don't actually do anything. However, even a detail as small and insignificant looking as this can actually have some really cool meaning behind it. These windmills were likely placed here because it was actually the Dutch who established the first European settlement in what would later become New York, which is of course Unova's inspiration. And this even fits into the context of the games themselves, because Isserus City is located right next to Dragon Spiral Tower, which is described as being the oldest tower in the Unova region. Personally, I absolutely love how this kind of a detail was both paid attention to and then even referenced with this little background element. But then they also took it a step further and involved it in the literal structure and layout of the region itself by putting a super old place like Dragon Spiral Tower in this area that is referencing one of the first settlements of the real-life New York area. And overall, in my opinion, it's this kind of stuff that makes the Pokemon world and the games even more fascinating than they already might appear on the surface. If you think so too though, be sure to let me know with a comment, leave a like on the video to help it out, which is super appreciated, and subscribe for more videos. I'll see you guys soon with another one of those new videos. Thanks so much for watching this one, I really appreciate it, and until the next one, as always, I will smell you guys later.